Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining today. Please say hi in the chat if you want to get to know some of your fellow participants. So I'm Leila Seith Hassan. I head up the data science and analytics department at Digitas, and we're the connected experience agency. My team uses data and data science to help inspire, predict, measure, optimize, and power consumer experiences that brings brands to life. We're a very proud Data Science Festival partner, and this is the last week of Data Science Festival online. It's been a really great month full of insightful talks and lunch and learns and keynotes and workshops, panels like this one. And then the final event is going to be this Saturday in person at CodeNode, which is quite exciting after a few extended periods off due to COVID. We'll have a booth there. We hope to see you there. There'll be some competitions and some prizes. We have quite a bright and loud logo, which is a unicorn, so you'll struggle to miss us. So please stop by and say hi. Our session today, though, is on the data science opportunity. Arguably, data science has been around since the 1960s, but most certainly the 1980s with the arrival of the world's first computer and then the personal computers, respectively. And so even though data science is potentially not new, it is definitely kind of up and coming. There's been prolific growth in the field in the last decade, and the Harvard Business Review even named data science the sexiest job title of the 21st century in 2012. And since then, LinkedIn actually put growth in data science jobs at 650%. In the UK alone, demand for data scientists and advanced analysts grew by 231% in the last 5 years, which is much more than the average growth of other jobs in the UK, which is touted at being at around 36%. And the reality is this growth isn't exactly slowing down. So today we're going to discuss what this means for current data scientists and those looking to become data scientists, getting more of an understanding of what data scientists actually do. It's very much all-encompassing. We'll also discuss, with the constant evolution of technology, how would you stay relevant? And even with all of this growth, is the term data scientist becoming irrelevant as it becomes too general? And then also, how do we make sure that data science is open to all and not just a few? So today, to discuss this and more, we have our panelists. I would ask them to turn on their cameras and unmute. We'll have a Q&A at the end, so feel free to add your questions to the Q&A function that you'll see down below. And we'll kick off from there. Welcome, Divya, Mikel, and Param. So first up, I'll get you to give a bit of an introduction. You're all data scientists. So just a brief overview of your name and job title, and then in 2 sentences, I'm going to pose a meme-based question to you. So Param, I might start off with you. If you could go through what your family thinks you do and what you actually do.
So my family think I work in finance, probably because I studied finance. But yeah, with all the Facebook controversies and things, they've started to hear the term data scientist a lot. So yeah, I think they're starting to get what I do. And so right now I work for Century Tech and I'm the data science team lead.
Thank you. And Divya, what do your friends think you do versus what you actually do?
So this isn't all my friends, but somebody did the other day, because we work in data science in an advertising agency. Someone the other day kind of made the comparison to Cambridge Analytica, which, it is not accurate. So what I actually do is I'm a data scientist and I work for Digitas. We use a range of different data science techniques, from machine learning to deep learning, to solve business and advertising problems for our clients, none of whom are politicians trying to rig an election, thankfully.
Yep, I agree with that. Thankful for that one. And then finally, Mikel, what do the non-data people in your company think you do versus what you actually do?
So yeah, some of them don't exactly know. They just think you can just take a piece of data and run a bunch of code or put it for a program, and then you get some insights. But yeah, they don't actually realize that there's a lot more to it, to processing the data and tweaking the models. And then some of them don't actually appreciate the non-technical sides, finding the business needs and like being able to communicate them at the end. But yeah, we always try to educate them as much as we can. So I work in the data science team alongside Divya. I'm a junior data scientist.
Excellent, thank you. And then, given this is really about the data science opportunity, and I think a lot of people in this session might be wondering how you got working in data science. What was kind of your training and your background? Param, you touched on it that you studied finance, but I might throw it to you first and just get you to elaborate. Was there data science within kind of the finance degree that you studied, or was it quite specific to finance? And then how did you transition?
Yeah, so in my like finance degree and masters, there was a lot of data related stuff, like some coding, like, you know, building regression models, stuff like that. I just didn't know at the time that data scientist was even a job. Like I'd not, like, you know, heard the term. So yeah, like graduated, started working as a finance analyst, you know, realized that, you know, day to day I'm working with data, I'm writing code. And then it was like, oh, okay, all the other stuff I learned at uni around like modeling and predictive work and stuff like that, there's an actual job for that. And it just was you know, very like logical next step to get into all of that. So yeah, I moved into it from finance quite naturally.
And then Mikel, how did you end up becoming a data scientist?
Yeah, so I didn't actually go to university. I did an apprenticeship, so I was after my A levels, I actually worked for my dad for a year, and I got a lot of practical experience out of that. He's a computer science educator, and so I spent time developing and teaching courses there. And then when I joined Digitas, I joined as a data apprentice, and so I spent like 80% of my time like working for Digitas, and then 20% I spent like doing course content for the apprenticeship. And now I've moved on to a degree apprenticeship, so like building on what I'd learned previously.
Excellent. And Divya, what about you?
Yeah, so mine's quite similar, I guess, to Param. I did maths at uni, and a lot of the stuff I did could be applied to data science, but I just hadn't heard of it. Like I didn't know it existed as a career, which, you know, wasn't that long ago when I went to uni. So I don't know if it's a problem with the industry, just not like raising awareness, because tons of other industries go into universities and schools and things like that and like tell people they're out there, but maybe that's something that we can work on as a community to let people know. So my first role was actually an analyst role, and that's how I got interested in data and more like learning more about data science through that avenue.
Did you find there were any challenges in your first role, kind of being a data analyst, that I guess saw you want to become a data scientist, or just generally being an analyst?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I guess so the ways that we were doing things in my first company, which was you know, it's quite a new startup, so it was a fairly like new data practice that they had, a really small team. The head of the team was, I think, 25, so very young data practice. And so the stuff and the ways that we were doing things, they weren't the most efficient. So I think it was like the quest for efficiency that led me towards like discovering data science and things.
And I guess, Mikel, I might throw this over to you just because you're kind of going through the second kind of level, the degree level of the apprenticeship. What have you found are the 3 characteristics or skills that data scientists need to possess that have helped you to be successful, or you could see other people needing to be successful?
So I think the first thing would be like knowing that things will go wrong. Like given that programming is like quite a big part of data science, like you have code or models or software or whatever it is, it's just not going to work sometimes, because that's just the nature of it, and you just need to figure it out. So sometimes like you'll be working on something and you realize, oh, how could I make such a stupid mistake, like, and you sort it out. But other times you need to find another way around it. So yeah, you need to be more creative in solving a problem. And then the next thing, I guess, would be like being investigating and being curious. because you should always question like what you see, because not only are you going to not only going to be able to spot some mistakes easier, but you're going to be able to find out more and have better insights, and reduce things like bias. And then I think the last thing, maybe always be willing to learn, because data science is such a new thing. Like there's always new things happening, there's always innovations. So and there's so much already that's like is out there to learn. Like it's impossible to know everything. So you just need to try and stay up to date as much as you can, and learn about better ways to do what you're currently doing better to make your life easier.
Great, thanks for that. I think that's really useful both for people wanting to become data scientists and then people that are already data scientists and are growing. One thing I wanted to talk about, I've found that, you know, the term data scientist can be all encompassing. And I know that when we're looking for data scientists, sometimes what we're actually looking for might be better classified as a data engineer or an analyst or a statistician. There's lots of iterations, but we just apply the blanket term kind of data scientist. I'm going to initially kick this off to kind of Param, but I'd love it if Divya and Mikel, you could jump in as well. And I'd also love to open this up to the audience. How would you distinguish yourself, Param, as a data scientist versus kind of a data engineer, an analyst, a statistician? And yeah, anyone else, feel free to jump in the chat, and Divya and Mikel, please interject.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because every company seems to have their own definition of what a data scientist is. Like, you know, one company might say, oh, you need a PhD to be a data scientist here. Another company might say you only need like SQL experience or something. So it's like, it's all over the map. But I think, you know, from my experience, like working at Digitas, I think, you know, working with Divya and Mikel in the data science team, you know, I think what differentiated us from like the analyst team and the engineering guys was, you know, we focused more on the actual ML side and the modeling, right? That was our area of expertise. So the tools that we used, you know, we're using virtual machines more, we're using things like PyTorch, you know, we're working in code a lot, whereas the analyst team might be using things like Tableau a lot more. They might be doing more of the analysis on the data, less of the modeling. And on the engineering side, they're thinking about deployment and stuff like that. So for me, yeah, that modeling part was like the big differentiator. Don't know if you agree, Divya.
Yeah, I think that's how I see it, but it definitely varies from company to company. Like, you know, in a small company, quite similar to our team actually, if, you know, we need to do some kind of automation, we would probably do it ourselves. Whereas in a different company, they'd have data engineers to do that. So yeah, it's I think there's definitely some overlap between all the different definitions. And you just need to be careful, like read the job description and make sure the job you're going for is what you really want to do.
Yeah, and I think for people who are applying and like, you know, looking at jobs and stuff, it's really good to understand what does the role actually require from you? Because some of these places that don't really understand data science and don't know how to use a data scientist, they might literally expect you to be the analyst, the data scientist, and the engineer. And you know, you have to think about like, is it really feasible for you to be like a full stack data scientist where you're doing all of that? You know, because if the company doesn't know how to properly, you know, use your skills, you know, their expectation might be that you're going to do all of it. But that's, you know, it's not really realistic.
It's interesting. There's a Forbes article that came out, I think about a year ago, and it kind of had one of those clickbaity titles, but it was that there'll be no data science jobs by 2029. And if you read it, it's not as clickbaity as originally I thought it was, but it's this idea that, you know, everyone's going to become a bit more of a specialist. So I think this year, the emerging job of the year from LinkedIn was AI specialist. So people kind of specialize into, you know, machine learning engineer or AI product manager, those kinds of specifications. And I guess, have you started to see that change? And I guess, do you see, or how do you think people can prepare themselves for this change in the next 5 to 10 years if they're currently data scientists now?
I think for me, one of the big parts is for like the person themselves to kind of understand like what parts of being a data scientist they enjoy, and then figure out, okay, what is my like area of interest and area of speciality, right? So if you know that, you know, the stuff that you like to do is building the models and doing the research and stuff around that, then, you know, if there was like a, you know, a new role or an emerging role called like an AI scientist or like an ML scientist, then it makes sense for you to move in that direction because you know that's the thing you enjoy. But if that's the thing that you don't enjoy, and maybe you prefer working with the data and, you know, putting together the insights and the dashboards and stuff at the end, then, you know, your direction might be more in the data analyst side or like a, you know, like a BI analyst or something like that. So yeah, it's figuring out what parts of the job you actually enjoy and then thinking about your progression like along that route.
And I guess Divya or Mikel, do you have anything or any thoughts to add on that?
Yeah, I think it has been a trend that there's lots of new and more specialized definitions for roles, but I think that there'll probably always be like a data scientist role because companies and especially businesses that aren't specifically for data science, they kind of want an all-encompassing, not necessarily someone to do the analytics and the engineering and all of that, but they kind of want someone who can do a bit of every aspect of data science. So I don't think if you don't want to specialize, I don't think you should worry too much. How about you, Mikel? What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with Param. It'll be like finding what kind of niche like you want to do the most. Yeah, and just like working on that. Yeah, it's because and if you want to like try different things, like because your career, like it was for about 5-10 years, it's such a long time, so you have the opportunity to do multiple things. You don't have to stick for one thing for your whole career. You can do lots of different things.
I guess on that, Mikel, what is the coolest thing about your job and what excites you the most about it? Which might be a good exercise for people on this call to do as well to help them work it out.
So my favorite thing, I guess, isn't the most data sciencey thing, but I guess I personally like visualizations. Like I'm always like looking on r/data is beautiful and Reddit and like seeing all the cool stuff there. So like when I have an opportunity to do that, some of that at work, like I'm always eager to. Yeah.
So that's actually really interesting because my next question, and I guess I'll put this to Divya and Param, is that there's a big misconception that data science isn't a creative field. So I'd love you to walk me through, I guess, what's the most creative project that you've worked on, and I guess why you feel it's so creative.
Sure. So I guess one of the most like creative situations that led to creative work was when the pandemic happened. And one of the clients that we were working with was a travel client. And obviously, you know, COVID, big pandemic, they started panicking. So what was creative about that was that we had to kind of adapt our solutions to this new situation that was never seen before. And actually everyone on this call worked on the same project together. So we were trying to forecast their travel bookings with, you know, new things constantly happening, new lockdown situations, trying to understand what kind of data sets to use and how to constantly adapt it. The whole process, I think, was really creative. You know, things like how do we train a model when we've only got, you know, a few months of COVID data and a never seen before type of situation. So yeah, that was really creative. And I think the interesting part was working our way around the problems and the issues.
Yeah, and I think Divya, like on that, you know, making the whole front end as well, you know, like giving the client like an interactive dashboard where they could, you know, put in different scenarios and the model would give them the outputs. But to the end user, it's just like a web app, right? So it's kind of cool, like doing some of the designing and looking at that part of it as well, which ties in with what Mikel said about, you know, the visualization aspect and stuff. So I'll say for me, like I know, you know, Leila, when we worked on Emotion XD, which was, you know, figuring out if we could map the emotions in text like tweets and reviews. You know, it was quite a creative one to work on, you know, an NLP based project. You know, you're thinking about things that, you know, you might not normally think of, like how do you define emotion? Like, you know, what's the technical definition? We're reading the psychology of it and stuff like that. And then building the model, testing it, and then after thinking about how are we going to visualize this, you know, like how do we look at like a review for, say, a hotel or something, and how do we visualize like the mapping of the 8 emotions in this review? You know, I think that's really creative, and that visualization part of it could be, you know, the difference between someone like understanding what your model does and, you know, not understanding. So yeah, it's good that we got to consider those parts as well, not just the models.
Totally agree. I think that, you know, anytime you're solving problems and you have the freedom and the flexibility to be able to do it, you know, in a way that you come up with in design, is always going to be creative, which I guess is why it's such a fascinating field to work in as well. And it's never dull and it's never boring, if you're in a role that gives you that kind of freedom and flexibility. With that said, running a team, I know that we always get asked to prove business value. Otherwise, we're not given the freedom and the flexibility to kind of do what we want. I guess, Param, I might put this back on you. To provide kind of real business value, you don't necessarily look for the highest accuracy model. And I guess it would be good to understand how in a data science project, you kind of, what are the key things that you're looking at to be able to create value when, you know, it's not just about necessarily the most accurate model that you can build.
Yeah, and I think this is something that can happen where like what data science do can be led by the technology, right? Like someone might say, oh, I've seen this new model or this new like implementation of a model, let's try it out. And then, okay, let's see if we can like fit this into what the business needs. When really, I think it's better working the other way, right? Thinking about what the client or the customer needs, and then looking at what tech you can use to satisfy that. So it's like flipping it the other way, and then kind of thinking about, okay, how is that going to actually impact your customer or your client, right? Like taking that into consideration, and then almost like iterating up to a state-of-the-art model, right? Thinking about what the cost implications, what the time implications, because the thing is, like a data science like team's time is not unlimited. So you will need to like, you know, work under some constraint and think about cost benefit analysis and stuff like that to figure out if what you're doing is going to be worth it in the end. So, you know, I know working at Digitas, it'd be, you know, us within data science, but we'd have like project managers, we'd have client services, you know, we'd have other people working with us to try to, you know, make projects tight. But yeah, I think the big thing for us was always thinking about like, what's the actual impact going to be on this, right? It's not just about the tech, it's what the sort of end goal of that is.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I think one area that everyone, and I've already seen a few people kind of put some comments in the Q&A that we'll get to more specifically later, is around how you can stay ahead as a data scientist, given that, you know, it is constantly evolving, everything's changing all the time. I might throw this to Divya first. So how do you think people can use their current role to make sure they're constantly upskilling?
Sure, I guess there's tons of ways, as long as your company, you know, gives you kind of flexibility. So if you're given a problem to solve, or you're working with someone in a different area of the business, they're not necessarily going to know the best way to solve the problem. So you have that flexibility to decide, you know, what's the best way to work on this. And if it happens that the best way is a new and emerging technology, then that's your opportunity to upskill. And, you know, if there's, you know, like at Digitas, we work with a variety of different clients with a variety of different problems. So there's always the opportunity to work with different data sets in a different data domain, you know, sometimes with text, sometimes with forecasting time series. So as long as you're not restricted in that aspect, there's always ways to work on projects that allow you to upskill at the same time.
And then, Mikel, are there any conversations that you think people could be having internally to help themselves? So be it with, other people in their teams, with their managers, or anyone else in the company. What are the types of things or conversations people could be having?
So I guess that would be kind of like we were talking earlier about business needs. So to help yourself, like you'll need to help others, and by finding out like what they need, and the problems they're facing, and like the problems that your clients are facing, then you will have like they'll realize like your value and like the value of data. And then you'll be able to say, oh, well, okay, look, like I have this idea of this thing we can do to innovate, and then it can also apply in the future to like this problem, and we'll be able to solve it. And yeah, it will be fixing two birds with one stone, like what you really want to do, but also something that's useful for the business.
And then this was very specific to Param. Even though it pains me, but I'm very happy for him. There's a point sometimes I think where you do want to move on to another company and, take a different role, take a different challenge. And I guess if you are potentially looking to do that and you've kind of upskilled and gotten what you can out of your current company, what are the types of things that you should be looking at from prospective companies to make sure that you will continue to learn and continue to evolve and, make sure that you're making the right move for the right reasons?
Yeah, so I think, some of the things to definitely ask is, do they have like training budgets, right? Whether that be money or time for people to learn. It's a bit of a red flag if they say no, because in data science, you do need to keep up. Right. I think that's the big thing. And that's something that, like we did like really well as a team. We used to have innovation catch-ups and stuff every week. Would go to meetups and stuff pre-pandemic and, like carry on going to them when they were online. So yeah, really understanding if they're going to give you some time to look at that type of stuff. And like, when it comes to going to conferences and stuff like that, like, do they provide like some money for that? And then figuring out if like you're going to have team members that you can learn off as well. I think that's a big thing, right? You don't want to go into a place where everyone has a very like similar skill set to you. You want to know that there are people doing different things, like, maybe you specialize in NLP, but someone else specializes in, time series forecasting or something like that. And another person has like more of a statistical background. Like, that type of structure works well because you're going to learn off your peers as well. But if it's too like homogenous, then it's not gonna work out really.
Actually, that's a good segue into my next question, and I'll put this one to Divya. At some larger organizations, just because the teams are so much bigger, you can end up being a data scientist that is doing a very specific thing. So you might be, we always talk about where you would be optimizing a single algorithm that's designed to get a person to do one engagement on one particular area of a website or a platform. And I guess the question to Divya is like, I can see how there'd be benefits to taking those kinds of roles at big companies, but how can you, in your current role and potentially future roles, make sure you're not pigeonholed into a small area of the field?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess in terms of like the larger tech companies where you are trying to optimize one algorithm and the business, let's say, is a streaming business that only deals with music streaming, you're obviously going to be working on the same algorithm and trying to optimize that because that's what the aim of the business is. So you'll probably know that before you apply for that kind of job, and they should make it very clear that that's what you'll be doing. And if not, kind of just ask loads of questions, what will the job be like day to day? So, if it's going to be the same thing every day, you'll probably know beforehand. But in terms of being pigeonholed in a company that's maybe smaller or where the data science practice should be more varied, let's say, a company like Digitas, not that we get pigeonholed at Digitas, but if it were to happen, the kinds of things that you might do is you're probably being pigeonholed by other people in the company who don't understand data science as much as you, and they probably don't know what your skill set is and everything you can offer, or even everything that data science has to offer. So I guess it's partly your responsibility as a team or as an individual to educate them about the things you can offer and spot opportunities where data science could be applicable in different ways, as opposed to just, you know, if they see you doing one project and one project well, or one or two different things, they'll keep coming back to you for the same thing, you know, but because they don't know what else there is out there. So it's a bit of a conversation between you and the other people.
I think it's a good point you make, and we touched on it earlier as well. There's this education piece, especially because it is, you know, not that well known by quite a lot of people, and that I guess in the end that benefits you by bringing everyone up to kind of a baseline understanding of what's possible and the value that can come. So the next section I want to talk about is the next generation of data scientists. Obviously at Digitas, we kind of use the apprenticeship program, to Mikel being kind of our first graduate, and now he's on the level 6 program, which is amazing. So I'm going to throw a few questions to Mikel, and also he's giving a talk on it on Saturday, which I'll plug a bit more later on. But how do you think that we can best introduce the next generation to data science, Mikel?
So yeah, like we were talking about earlier, people should learn about it at an earlier age. Like Paramdeep and Divya were saying that they only heard about data science as adults, and that's true for many people. Like that, children are more than capable of learning about it. They already do computer science at school, so why not data science? At least like data science should be part of computer science. So yeah, schools should be doing more to teach the subject because it's so important. And yeah, if they're not teaching it, then they should be learning. They can learn otherwise outside of school.
And then if you had a 10-year-old, I guess, on that theme, they expressed an interest in data science, how would you get them started, for those of us that have relatives or friends or children that are kind of that have 10-year-olds around them, and we're trying to get more people in?
Well, there's actually a website called Machine Learning for Kids that has like a bunch of projects on it that you can do, like using Scratch and Python, and you can make your own projects there as well. But like more specifically, like you could, for instance, build an AI that you can play a game with, like noughts and crosses or Connect 4 or something like that. So it'll play against you. Or you could like collect some data with a sensor and analyze it. So for instance, a weather sensor tracking like temperature and humidity like over time, or maybe tracking like the foods that your 10-year-old eats and seeing how that affects them over time.
Very cool. So I guess the next section is something quite close to, I think, what we try to talk about as much as possible. So a 2020 BCG study found that as few as 15% of women today 15% of data scientists today are women. And we all know, and we've all talked about it on this panel as well, that, you know, if you don't have diversity in the teams that are building algorithms and AI, it can result in bias in what you're actually developing and building them. And I think a lot of people talk about the fact that if you have more diverse teams, that helps you to limit the potential bias that you might accidentally be kind of perpetuating or putting into your models when you're building them, or missing in the data itself. So I guess Param and Divya, it'd be good to hear from you just specific issues that come from not having representative teams, and that can be across lots of different axes, not just kind of gender, and I guess from both a technical and non-technical perspective would be good to understand the issues.
Yeah, so I guess one of the big ones that we've seen with, like, you know, image recognition, like facial recognition, stuff like that, is because the teams that are building those models aren't diverse, they aren't choosing or looking at their data sets, their training data sets, to make sure that they are diverse as well. And then if your training data doesn't represent the audience that you're going to use this on, then it's obviously going to, you know, not be as effective for certain types of people. But, you know, like no one's thinking about that in the team, right? So that's a big thing, right? You're only going to think about the things that, you know, you're already thinking about. And so it's about getting other people's viewpoints. And I think that's why at Digitas, like our team was super diverse, right? Like, you know, across like all axes. So it was good that, you know, we can work on, you know, different client projects and have like representation in there. I think that made a big difference. But yeah, the real practical impact is not considering like the training data that goes into your models.
Yeah, and I would say, like, from a non-technical point, another danger of not having representative or diverse teams could be that, you know, let's say there's like an industry that's really male dominated, and young girls, for instance, see that all the tech CEOs, all the big like Apple, Google, whatever, they're all men. They might start to internalize that this isn't a career that's for me. Even if I entered this career, I could never be, you know, the CEO of Google or Apple or the next Steve Jobs or whatever. So I think it's good for the younger generation to have role models that they can look up to, so that they can see, you know, that this is a career that could be for me and I could reach the top and, you know, get to those levels.
So I wonder if that's partly it's how people are entering the data science profession. And I guess Mikel, as the person that went through an apprenticeship program, versus I guess the other three on this call went to university, and that was purely because when I was up and coming, it was the thing that you had to do, and I think that that's changing. But it would be good to understand your perspectives on, you know, what are the different entry points that exist or existed or are changing, and what do you think it needs to look like to make data science, I guess, a bit more representative of society?
Yeah, so it would just be about like employing people from a different range of places, so not just university. Because, for instance, another reason I didn't go to university is because like so many people these days go to university that there's not much to distinguish them, like if they're all doing like the same courses. It's what is needed more now, like to get a job, is practical experience, which you can get from an apprenticeship. So employers should also consider, oh, okay, so let's hire these people. Maybe they're not as academically abled, but they're more practically abled. So yeah, they can. So yeah, they'll offer like new perspectives, like new ideas, and they're less bias, for instance.
And then Param, do you think that university only backgrounds are becoming redundant in the field of data science then?
I think things are definitely changing, right? And it was good to be at Digitas, as you know, Mikel was coming on and we were working on, you know, the apprentice program and stuff, because I do think like data science is a practical profession, right? It's about actually getting in there and writing code and like building models and like doing the doing, right? Which makes it, I guess, closer to, you know, if you were like a graphic designer or an artist or something and someone wants to look at your portfolio, right? So if we think about, you know, when we would interview and look at candidates and stuff, like we'd want to know, like, can you actually do it, right? Like, what projects have you worked on? Have you got any stuff like that's publicly available that we can see? You know, do you have like a GitHub and stuff like that? So, you know, I think we, you know, we did weight the practical element of it, like, you know, far higher than the theoretical, because, you know, that's the way we worked, right? Like we got in there and did things. So yeah, I think it's like a really good, like viable alternative. And, you know, like it means that, you know, we can pick from like a wider talent pool as well, which was really good for us.
And then Divya, have you got any other ways that you think we can get more people into data science? And then I guess also conversely, what are some of the blocks that might exist to getting people into data science?
Sure, yeah. So I kind of I strongly believe that there are like many routes into data science. Like no matter what background you have or what stage you are in your career, I feel like the thing you need to do, which Param touched on, is to start doing it. You know, start learning, start working on projects, get yourself, you know, some data, and just start doing things really. There's all sorts of different resources to learn and to constantly upskill, and even like working professional data scientists are always upskilling. So it's part of being a data scientist to constantly learn, go on GitHub, make yourself some projects, go on Kaggle, maybe join some competitions. I definitely don't think you need a PhD to work in the field. You know, some of the best data scientists I've known on this call have not had a PhD, and likewise, you know, many people with a PhD still know nothing about data science. So it's just about learning and doing. You know, we come from all different kinds of backgrounds on the Digitas team, and I don't think that should be a blocker at all.
And so I have one last, I guess, weighty question for everyone before I open it up to Q&A. And there's already a fair few questions coming through, so keep them coming, because I think this is such an interesting area, and I'm really keen to hear what kind of questions and thoughts the audience has as well. So the big weighty question is, what does the future hold for data science and data scientists in the next 5-10 years? And that's just the question. You can have any type of response. I'm going to start with Mikel, just because that's the order of my screen here.
So yeah, I think it will be kind of what we were talking about before, like people be more specialized, like finding their niche. But maybe like lots of stuff that we currently are working on will be automated, and then that will allow us to tackle like new problems that don't exist yet. But I don't think we can predict like exactly like what is going to happen. Like who knows? Like given like what's happened in the last few years. So I think it's more about like adapting and being ready to learn new things and being able to respond to whatever happens.
And then Param, over to you.
I guess my big thing is, I think there's going to be a lot more questions about like, should we be using ML for certain things? You know, right now it's really new, it's innovative, like, you know, a lot of people are having like good results with it. But I think over the last like couple of years, like, you know, Divya mentioned like Cambridge Analytica and stuff like that, there's been a lot of like negatives around it. And, you know, we've seen loads of stuff with like bias in certain models, like, you know, facial recognition, some of the skin cancer detection stuff coming out. And I think more questions are going to be asked about, okay, should a model be used for this? And if so, how can we validate like why it's making a prediction, right? The transparency aspect of it is going to be big as well, because the decisions being made by these algorithms are getting, you know, they're just increasing, and some of them are like high stakes. If you think about stuff like, you know, self-driving cars, you know, when something happens, people are going to be asking, okay, why did that happen? And like, who's liable for that, right? So yeah, I think that's going to be like a big topic coming up.
And then Divya, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think with both of you, like that there are, you know, we're coming to a point where almost every company has at least one data scientist. And you know, every industry you can apply data science, you can train models and things, but we need to, as Param says, we need to make sure that the models that we're training, they're not biased, and they're not negatively impacting society. And I don't know if that should come about through more regulation from the government, because, you know, there's lots of regulation in other industries, but because this is such a new industry, people can, you know, deploy models which are full of bias that could impact society. So maybe there needs to be more, not, you know, not in a negative or sinister sense, but more regulation in this industry that impacts many people.
Yeah, that's great. I agree with everything that you've all said. Really insightful. Thank you. So opening this up to the Q&A, I'm going to try and group some of them together. There's a few that are quite similar And if someone wants to ask a specific question to either Divya, Mikel, or Param, feel free to add that into the Q&A. Otherwise, I will open it up to everyone, or if I think it's quite specific to someone, I'll direct it to them specifically. But first up, and this is open to anyone, could you suggest what open projects or real data projects could be done to help build up someone's resume?
Yeah, I think going on Kaggle and like, you know, making like a notebook, which is, you know, like a piece of analysis or something that other people can read. You know, Mikel mentioned Reddit, and I think Data is Beautiful, where, you know, people post charts and stuff like that, you know, getting some stuff on there. And, you know, if you can, like, do a competition, like, you will learn like so much from like doing a competition start to finish, and like, you know, doing it like with the community that are also doing the competition. You know, because you're all kind of finding things at the same time, and like you're working against each other but together as well. So it's you know, you can team up and things. And I think like having things like you know, publicly viewable work and Kaggle competition experience like really helps, because it shows potential employers that, you know, you can do it, right? And there's like proof and evidence of that.
If anyone wants to build, feel free to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I agree with Param. And one thing I would also add, which is similar, is take part in a hackathon. Like pre-COVID, probably there is many hackathons now, but they're online. But pre-COVID, I took part in a hackathon that was actually held in Amsterdam. I think it was called Hack for Good. And it was such a good like learning experience. You get to meet so many different people you can learn from. They had, you know, experts around, so if you had a problem or a question, you could ask them. And you know, there's no better way kind of to learn than to work in a group to solve a problem that you've just, you know, been presented with, in an environment where everybody else is trying to solve the same problem, and share and learn with each other.
So I'm going to combine two questions into one here. So it's about becoming a data scientist. And so starting from a place, I guess, from the questions here, people that have either an analyst background or they have some experience in some coding languages, but they're not a data scientist. What would you suggest to get them to shift into becoming a data scientist? And I guess anything from self-learning to courses to, I guess, role changes or anything else really. I guess it's a broad question. I guess looking from answers from all three of you actually on what you'd suggest.
I think I've gone, Mikel.
Okay. I was thinking there's kind of what we were just talking about. It's about just finding projects you're interested in. So like it doesn't matter if like it's been a project that's been done before. Like if it's something on Kaggle, like a past competition, it's just like finding something that's you're interested in, getting data for it, and then just getting stuck in. Like it, all the theory can come later. Like you just need to like try it out for yourself. Like for instance, you can go on Kaggle and get some data, and you just need the motivation to try it in. And like if it fails, if it doesn't work, it's okay. Like you just try again. And like all the stuff that you need to know about like coding, like all the fundamentals and concepts, like you can learn stuff on like courses like DataCamp or Udemy, stuff like that. But that's not the priority. The priority is like understanding the project itself. Like how does the project work? Like the code and the theory will come naturally, like as you learn it. Or you can work on a project and then later you can decide, oh, I'm going to learn about this thing so I understand it better.
And I think like another thing is, you know, a lot of people like want to move into data science from like finance type roles, analyst type roles, and stuff like that. One of the easiest like switches you can make is if you work with data and spreadsheets and stuff a lot, like try to consciously switch to using R and Python for things that you would normally do in a spreadsheet. You know, all the functionality is there, but you'll be like practicing writing code and like using the packages to work with data and stuff like that. You know, maybe you'd pull data from a database and then work on it in a spreadsheet, like try to do that in an R or Python environment. And then you'll find that, you know, when the data sets get bigger, like it's not an issue, right? Because you're not capped by Excel's like limits and stuff like that. Plus the things that you're doing are now reproducible, right? You know, if in the next month your data set gets updated, you can just run your script again and everything is done. You know, you're not doing things manually. So I think for a lot of people that I've worked with, that's been like a good gateway, right? To replace their manual spreadsheet work with code. Yeah, that's definitely a good way to go. And, you know, Mikel mentioned like doing courses like, you know, like going on data camp and stuff like that. Data camp and Code Academy are both like really good when it comes to learning some of that and learning, you know, programming, like with the intention of getting into data analysis. So yeah, those are great options as well.
I think my one add to that as well is, you know, if you're looking to transition from another role into a data science role, and this goes for any, I guess, transition that you make in your career, you might need to make a sideways move, or you might even need to go back a step, which can feel really daunting and difficult, and, you know, has financial implications as well. But if you're thinking about long term, that's what you want to do. Sometimes, even though, you know, you might have a skill set or you've been doing a job that's in close proximity, you know, it isn't necessarily a sideways transition. You might have to kind of go backwards to eventually go forward. So a quick one. What are the best languages, tools to learn?
I think learning R and or Python, you know, are almost mandatory if you want to get into data science. Knowing SQL as well is massively helpful. So yeah, those are like the main ones. Yeah.
Are there any specific certifications that you think are useful? And this is in regards to kind of getting a job. And then I guess another part of that question is also, you know, how could someone get more traction in their applications? Are there things that, you know, companies generally look for? Are there ways to demonstrate your skills more? You talked about having links to things online. Is that something that you think would, you know, be really useful for someone to invest some of their free time into? How do you think people can get seen more and get their CVs through and through to interview stage more?
I think one thing I'd say is, I don't know if you agree, like Leila, but like in data science, there is no real certification, right? Like, because we get asked this a lot, right? Especially when people come in from other disciplines where like it's very clear if you have like a qualification in that, right? For data science, I don't think that exists, right? There is no thing where it's like, oh, I have done this and passed this exam, therefore I am this level of data scientist. Like it just doesn't exist. So like, you know, I've never looked for a particular qualification or anything when looking at candidates. So definitely like, don't worry about that, especially if someone's trying to sell you like a course that, you know, you're going to get a certificate or something at the end. Like it's probably not going to be worth it. It's going to be more about like, what did you actually practically learn on that course? And can you show that, right? Like, so having some type of portfolio, whether it is like your Kaggle account or your GitHub account or something like that, like having something like that that you can link to in a job application is like massively useful. Because then we can see it, right? We can go and we can see your coding style, we can see your presentation style, like we can see that you can actually do the work. And that's the most important thing.
One of the questions is quite specific on, you know, they're quite tight on time. They're a teacher, they've done a course over lockdown. And so I guess I would take from what you've just said would be to really focus on building out something that they could share with a prospective employer. And I think one thing that I would say is it's quite obvious when people have done something versus read something. And the way that you understand concepts and can talk about something. Because I think if you can't explain what you're doing quite simply, even though, you know, what you're doing is quite hard and it can be quite complex, if you can't boil it down to simple concepts, it means you haven't understood it properly.
Is Leila frozen?
Yeah, she's back.
You back?
That was nerve-wracking. You always hope that doesn't happen in a panel, don't you? Yeah, I was saying if you don't boil it down, you don't necessarily understand it fully. And so I guess I would say to someone that's quite tight on time, get really good at something, build a version of it, understand it quite well, and then use that as your entry point. And then kind of from there, you'd be able to grow and grow. I've talked for quite a while. I don't know, Divya or Mikel, if you have any builds on that at all as well.
Yeah, I'd say I'd agree with both of what you just said, and to add to that, it's all very well knowing a ton of different techniques, and listing them all out on your CV. But I think one of the key things that employers look for is, firstly, do you know when to use which technique? When is it most appropriate? Even if you have like 2 or 3, skills in your bag, it's far more valuable if you know when to apply which one than to just know 100 different ones and apply the wrong thing to the wrong problem. And if you're already in the field and you're looking to move to a different role and get traction on your CV, I think this is a previous question, but one thing that people really look for is, how did you provide business value with the things you did, rather than just, I did this, this, and this, and I had this accuracy, blah, blah, blah.
That's a great point, actually, Divya. I should have mentioned that. That makes a huge difference, actually, on CVs.
And then, yeah, to Divya's point about, like, even if you only know a few things, but you know them well, like that can be one thing that's daunting about getting into data science, right? When you realize like, oh, there's people here doing image stuff, and then there's NLP here, and then there's all these other models. And it's like, you kind of feel like you need to know all of it, right? But that's not the case. Like, it's better to think about, okay, like what are you interested in? It might be NLP, it might be image, and then kind of just focus on that for a bit and get really good at that, because then you'll kind of stand out from the people who are like, just average at everything, because then you're a bit of a specialist. And then going back to what you said, Leila, about being able to explain it and like, relay that information, because you have specialized on like that one particular path, like you're going to know it, and you're going to be able to sort of like, teach people and like, get that across like way better than just knowing bits of everything.
I think there's been a theme, like people that aren't in role or in a role that's adjacent, I guess, and like, how would you prove value? I think another word for value is impact. So like if you're doing competitions or you're doing kind of your own projects that are trying to, build something or determine something, being able to talk about the kinds of impact that could have if it was released into the real world, versus just talking about, my model was this accurate, means that if you were to come into business, you would be able to kind of answer, business problems and solve business problems and prove value for the business through the data science work that you're doing. So I think even just proving the impact that the kind of work you're doing and talking about it in that way is another way to get traction in new roles and prove that you know what you're doing, and you'd be a good hire, really. So I think I might call it for the panel today. I don't know, Divya, Param, or Mikel, if you have any final thoughts. Otherwise, I'll wrap up for today. No? All right. So the final plug I want to make. So we've obviously got the event this week at CodeNode in person, which is super exciting. Mikel will be speaking at 9 a.m. This Saturday. He'll be talking about starting out in data science and offering hints and tips to anyone that's new in the industry, and also talking about how the education system and the industry can better support the next generation of data scientists. So he would love to see you there. We'll all be there on the day. Come see us at the event. We have openings at Digitas at the moment, so feel free to come up and talk to us about them, or find us online. We're all on LinkedIn. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And please say thanks in the chat to our wonderful panelists.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.